Then good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the 11th iteration of the Data Talk sessions hosted by the European Data Portal and Support Center for Data Sharing team. Today, we're happy to be joined by two of the authors of the eGovernment Benchmark 2020 report, Jochem and Roel Geilleit. I welcome you both to correct my pronunciation, as those are both not easy names. They'll be speaking to us about their research into the eGov report and will be sharing insights that they have gathered throughout this process. Please be aware that this session is being recorded and it will be published next Monday and promoted on our EDP YouTube channel. To Jochem and to Roel, I give you both the floor.
Thank you very much, Delina, and thank you very much for hosting us.
Shall we first do a quick correction on the names? And a short introduction, perhaps. So Jochem Dogger, as a consultant, and we did this research in the past year. And your pronunciation was already quite good. Thanks.
Yeah, I can also introduce myself. My name is Roel Geilleit, so it's a little bit difficult with the last name, I can imagine, for non-Dutch speakers. Me and Jochem work for Capgemini and Vent, both in the policy research unit, public policy research unit. And indeed, we have been working on this project for the last couple of years, and the eGovernment benchmark has been running since 2012. So now we've just published a couple of weeks ago the 2020 edition. But the whole conception of the eGovernment benchmark is eventually to provide insight into the state of play of eGovernment and to promote learning amongst eGovernment policy makers and to improve the state of play for European citizens. We work in this process a lot with member states and their representatives. Currently, we have 36 countries that participate or that we research. We have intense contact with their representatives from the public administrations, and we work with mystery shoppers in those countries. And those mystery shoppers evaluate the services like a regular citizen would do. We really want to know how, if your neighbor in whatever country in the European Union wants to attain a certain service digitally, how would it work for them? And does it work well? Where are the pain points and what can be improved? And especially want to promote learning from one country to another and to check how it evolves over time. Our method has been based on the priorities set by the European Commission in different eGovernment action plans or the Tallinn Declaration, for example. They guide our focus points for the methodology. This methodology is based around a kind of live event approach. Of course, there are a lot of, you can still go back one slide.
All right.
Just to focus which services we evaluate. If you can imagine, a public administration delivers a lot of services, but in order to make a good storyline or for us to be able to know what to evaluate, we have created 8 live events. For example, one regarding losing and finding a job, for example. So say I would be fired next week. What do I need to do? Where can I get the services? And what is a logical flow for me to go through? In that sense, you kind of scope a bite-sized chunk that is relevant to the user and also overseeable for the administration. Like I said, we do the data collection now in 36 countries, so the EU 27 member states, but also the broader European area, including, of course, Switzerland, Norway, but also Serbia, and also a lot of partner countries. So that also gives us a broad overview to be able to draw comparison between different countries and see which one performs well, which one performs a little bit less. For all the live events and all those countries, we sample over 13,000 websites. This is done in a biannual sequence. So we have 8 live events in total. We do 4 1 year and the 4 other in the next. So to manage the workload and also to be able to see a progression. If you evaluate each website each year, that's probably a bit too much to really be able to see an improvement. So this is a nice balance between those. And we continuously evolve the methods, which is a very tricky balance because we want to be able to draw comparisons over time. So the methodology can't change too much, but you also do need to take into account changing priorities, but also changing technologies. For example, in the beginning, we were mostly focusing on services being online at all. And thankfully, that has been a steady progress. But currently, a lot of services are online, and now you get more the question, okay, how well are they set up? Are they available also through mobile devices? So the questions change over time, which is in a way a good sense because that also means that the level of service provision is improving in a way. But we do want to make it that step better eventually. I can give a short overview of how everything works and hangs together. So how we go from the policy priorities set by the European Commission to our eventual methods. The main three policy key points are user empowerment, so enabling European citizens to use services at their convenience and at their own time and pace, and to improve the digital single market. So also being able, for me from the Netherlands, to attain a service from Germany, from Hungary, from Britain, to be able to work across the European Union seamlessly. And we focus on preconditions, mostly in terms of technological implementations. So there are a couple of key enablers, we call them, that really empower citizens and enable good service provision from government. For example, having a national EID or having an EID at all enables a lot of additional functionalities for citizens. So from these three policy priority areas, we have defined a lot of several top-level benchmarks, which also flow down into a lot of different indicators. One of a couple of which are, I think, especially interesting in terms of how public administrations deal with citizens' data. For example, we added transparency of personal data as one of the indicators in 2016, if I'm not mistaken, which really focuses on how well can citizens see what governments know about them and when it is used and what it is used for. You see that that is really becoming a higher priority to evaluate from our side. It's not always at the best level or the highest level yet, but by measuring it, we can hopefully also recognize good practices and see the evolution of that indicator.
Might also be interesting to mention that it does increase over time. So we are seeing a steady improvement for transparency of personal data. And we especially saw an increase after the publication of the GDPR. So that was quite interesting. The GDPR was published and the percentage improvement further increased. So that was interesting to see. Also, quite an interesting indicator from a data standpoint is the authentic sources indicator, which is part of the preconditions. With authentic sources, we mean that citizens only need to enter their information once. So that as soon as you give the government certain information, that you don't have to enter it time and time again. A good example of this sort of way to use data is doing my income taxes. So doing your income taxes can be quite an extensive procedure. I need my tax number. I need to know exactly how much I made last year, and I need a number of other points of information. And I need to do this each year. And from that standpoint, it would be quite easy if my government would already pre-fill a lot of that information. So the tax authority already sees how much money I make. They know my tax number. They know my name, where I live, etc. So with authentic sources, we intend to measure how good governments are in assisting you entering your data. And this is a process of sharing data between government bodies. Also interesting to know, we have done an income tax pilot a couple of years back, where we want to see how much of the information is pre-filled. So pre-filling my name and my address is probably not the hardest thing to do. It becomes harder when you need information from different government bodies and when you have to bring it together to one well-delivered service. So that's another way to look at how you should actually deliver government services. I think then the interesting part would, of course, be to see how everyone scores. So to say it quickly, each year we see that Malta and Estonia are the best performers in our sample, closely followed by Austria, Latvia, and Denmark. These countries actually have almost all services that we measure online. You can actually always log in with an EID, and most of your data is pre-filled. So everything works in those countries. But luckily, so not everyone is already there, but we see that the countries that are not there yet are improving, and they're actually improving quite rapidly. So we have made a division between leaders and laggards, and leaders are the 5 best performing countries, and then laggards are the 5 worst performing countries in Europe. And we see that the countries that are currently scoring quite low are improving rapidly, and especially big improvements we see in Luxembourg and in Hungary. Also interesting is that countries that perform quite well are often relatively small countries that are well technologically evolved. And this is quite easy to understand because then you can deliver a lot of your services in a central way. So if we compare that with, say, Germany or with the UK, these are also countries that are quite well developed in a technological sense, but they also have to make services available to many countries. So that often means that each region or each city has to have their own website with their own way of service delivery. That's all at a very high level. And we often see that that is quite hard to make services available in larger countries. So I think actually in quite 3 short slides, we have given a presentation and provided some explanation as to what we did. But since it's a data talks, of course, it would also be quite interesting to take some time now for questions to specifically delve into topics that are relevant to you as a data-minded audience.
Thank you for that smooth transition, Jochem. Then from that, I open the floor also to the participants to unmute themselves and to ask questions. And I can kick it off for the first one. And that is so this study has been running now for several years. How has the methodology been updated in each iteration? How have you used the feedback and the findings from the first round to improve it for the next? And the second part of that question is, in changing the methodology, how do you still control, let's say, the impact it has on the scoring and the comparison to the previous years? So as you're changing different aspects, that can mean that some countries then respond differently as they would have the previous years, which changes how they are ranked in the system. So
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I can.
Yeah, sure.
I can give some short introduction. Yeah, of course, like I said, we try to meet the policy priorities of the European Commission as closely as possible. They also update their eGovernment action plan each 3 years, 4 years, something like that, which quite closely matches also our evaluation cycles. Like I said, we our methodology is applied in a biannual cycle. So each 2 years, we evaluate all live events and all services. So if you have a session of 4 years, that gives quite a good time frame to look back and to see, okay, how did it go within this time frame? So also after each 4 years is a good moment for us to do some more invasive surgery to the methodology. For example, we had some indicators initially included and were a little bit too vague or a little less actionable, which were quite broad questions, for example, about the ease and speed of use, which was very broadly interpretable, of course, by mystery shoppers. So we dropped that, for example, and we added mobile friendliness, which became more important as people were using the web more through mobile devices instead of their desktops, which also required us to implement new methodologies. Before that, everything was done by the mystery shopping, but now we also do quite some analyses via automated tools. But like you said, it does also change the scoring and how countries compare to each other. So that's also always quite tricky to keep that contained, but we try to approach that as much as possible by only changing the methodology or at least the scoring each 4 years. So we have a set time frame between you can compare, and then we go to the next cycle.
And to add a bit on this, we do this in cooperation with the member states. So we hold workshops and then we consider numerous options, what could be changed. And actually, at the start of this year, we started a new iteration. So we had room for a new methodology update. So then we could actually look at things that are currently very relevant in eGovernment. So one example would be that there is a web accessibility directive from the European Commission, which is about how to make people with disabilities, how can you help them in using the internet? So how can people who have a visual impairment still use government services? That has just gone into use in August or in September. And now we are intending to measure to what extent government websites offer their services in an accessible way to everyone. So it's also looking at what kind of topics are currently relevant in an e-government perspective.
Okay, thank you. I open the floor to others who have questions. I saw a few videos turn on. I'm not sure if you want to jump in.
I do have a follow-up question for the methodology.
Yes, please, Ray. And then Gianfranco, you can go next.
The figure that we're seeing right now, the scoring, is that based on sort of if services are available, yes or no, or also the extent to which they are, and then how is that rated sort of by the mystery shoppers?
Yes, so the mystery shopper works in the following way. They receive a questionnaire from us with a number of government websites. So let's say doing your income tax, to stay close to that example, then we first have found a website where you can do your taxes. Then the mystery shopper has to pretend like he's doing his taxes. And then there are questions about, is there information available and is the service available? But also a question about how do you authenticate online? Can you use your EID? Are there support options? Are there fora where you can share your opinions? And all these sorts of questions, the mystery shopper has to answer yes or no. And that is then validated by the member states. And then the final score you see on the last slide is actually the average of all these indicators. So it's the total comparison of all collected data that we have.
So it's not only whether services are available, it's also, are they transparent about how they work? Are they easily usable? Are they, have they good technological implementations? It's the whole spectrum of what we measure, essentially.
Okay, thank you.
Next, Gianfranco, then we'll go to Else.
I'm curious of many things, Roel and Jochem, and you know me, of course, we're colleagues, but we never really talked too much about your project, so I have so many questions for me now. The one that triggers me the most at the moment in listening to your reporting about it is, to what degree, in your experience and from what you see in your study, you see the countries developing against these many dimensions in a way that is integrated. So I wonder to what degree we are smart enough to not just becoming great, perhaps, at managing the identity of citizens on one side and great at making more web accessible services on the other, but to actually see this as an integral experience and service to citizens. Do you see this happening? Do you think we should do more in that direction? What's your feeling?
If I could give my 2 cents, I think in general it's quite a siloed approach. So either you see services from service provider A or a certain ministry improve across the board, and it's just one of the administration that really puts a focus on it. Other times you see that the whole administration is focusing on one thing. So like, okay, this year we're going to focus on mobile friendliness, or this year we're going to focus on cybersecurity. There are a couple of instances that they really overhaul their whole eGovernment platform. I know, yeah, Macedonia did it, I think 2 years ago from the top of my mind, where they just took all federal services and gave them a whole new approach. Just while we were doing the data collection, so that was a little bit difficult. But that's not like a frequent thing. Most improvements are still quite siloed, unfortunately.
Why do you think it is so? Is it a matter of perhaps the technology fashion of the moment, or perhaps guidance or directions coming from above? And to what degree Europe is pushing and can push so for this to become an integrated approach?
So I don't believe Europe can really push in the demanding sense. They can more provide guidance. And I think it's mostly a lack of cooperation. So there are a number of countries where you see cooperation between countries, but also within countries that immediately provide better services to their citizens. So an interesting example is in Hungary, where each little municipality had their own websites, and all those websites were, well, not up to the current standards. And what Hungary did was to create one e-municipality portal that includes all Hungarian municipalities, and that says, okay, we offer all these services here. We provide all preconditions via this website. And in that way, they integrated actually all of the things we are measuring for all of their cities in one big project. So you can do it, but well, as Roel said, it's often quite siloed, and you have to overcome those silos. And that seems to be quite a challenge in many countries.
Yeah, and to close on this, I observed similar kind of pattern from the open data perspective in the national teams. So you can very commonly find different solutions adopted by different ministries in the same countries. And if we want to play down to the basics, it may just be a matter of budget. So each ministry doing their own thing, not having even the opportunity to coordinate. To some degree, maybe a political element that is missing or a push for coordination. But all of this is useful. I hope it's useful for the rest of the audience as well. I'm sure we can do a little more, or at least to facilitate the process to be more coordinated across entities. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Then else?
Yes, do you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, thanks for the introduction. Very interesting, very concise. I have a question on the mystery shoppers. How do you recruit and select them based on what criteria? And as you said that you also assess the websites on web accessibility criteria, do you include shoppers from that specific target group?
Yeah, thank you for your question. In terms of recruiting mystery shoppers, we work together in a consortium with both IDC, Society, and Politecnico di Milano. Though Politecnico di Milano is mostly helping us in the data analysis. But together with the other three, we have like a pan-European network via which we recruit the mystery shoppers. There are a couple of requirements we have for each mystery shopper. For example, they must be a national citizen in order to be able to actually try out the services or look how they work. And those mystery shoppers get assigned the services and the URLs we collect beforehand, and also some URLs to test from a different country. For example, our French mystery shopper could also get a service to evaluate in Germany whether or not he's able to access it or not. And we do have, in each country, we have 2 mystery shoppers in order to have some double check kind of 4 right principles. So we can at the end see, okay, is there a discrepancy between the 2 mystery shoppers and what could be the cause of that? If there is anything that they disagree about, we check further what should be the answer for our evaluation.
And to give a slight addition, the mystery shopper also needs to have an EID device. So most countries have an EID, but we see that not in all countries the EID is used as much as it could be. But to fully test the services, the mystery shopper needs to have such an EID. And to help them on their way, we provide quite extensive briefings. So to provide them with instructions, we also provide them with an instruction guide. And so we train them, so to say, so that their results are comparable. And as Roel said, we use live events, and with each live event, there's a persona. So the mystery shoppers have to think or act like they are the persona. So they shouldn't be themselves, but they should be the persona that we have constructed to get comparable and consistent answers.
And instead of giving people a persona to play and to step into their shoes, did you consider, or why don't you recruit people that are that persona, that are really from that user group?
That could be an option. I get the point. So to give an example of one of the live events and where it could be tricky, we also have the family live event included, which like covers the scope of everything you needed to do from your home life, essentially. So both register if you have a newborn child, but also register yourself if you retire. So it's quite a broad spectrum that we needed to have mystery shoppers from if you want to cover all those cases. Especially if you also add up studying or business startup in which you need to create a business or register yourself as a new business. Covering all those separate domains as actual users would be quite more involved than we have the scope for now to do, unfortunately. But also it's from our end, not so much about completing the service as such, but just about, okay, are you able to access it? Are you able to find it? Are you able to get the information about how the service works? So from that end, we can get quite good results from with the methodology we use right now.
To provide some...
I'm asking this because to me it seems important that you recruit people that are on the level, intellectual state of mind, whatever, of the people who will use these services, because it's easier, of course, for a well-trained and informed mystery shopper to conclude something than for someone who is blind or who is his literacy is low, who can barely read. And those people exist as well, and they also have to be taken into account.
Yeah.
Yes.
No, certainly. To also get back on the point of accessibility and for people who are blind or have accessibility problems, which was also one of your early questions. That's one of the pilots we are now trying or looking into trying out this year for the new methodology, but it's not implemented yet or set in stone that we're going to implement that. But I also think how you call it, literary level would also be interesting.
Yeah, I don't know.
That would also certainly be interesting. But on our end, it's also relevant to have the results comparable. But it's always a balance on our end between having the results comparable between different countries and having a full scope of everything we evaluate.
Yes, but then you should do it in every country, I guess.
So to add on the literacy, we also looked into this with regard to the last methodology update. So in many countries, you see that governments are aware that they have to use quite simple language to their citizens to make text easily understandable. And for example, some of the Dutch government websites are already focusing on this. However, it's quite hard to measure this, we found out. So we could do a language check on simplicity for English, but it gets very complicated very fast to compare the complexity of the Dutch language with the complexity of, let's say, the Greek language, which even has another alphabet. So there's a sort of a consideration between what is interesting and important, and then how to make services understandable for your citizens is very important, but also can you make it work? And that is quite hard for, the example mentioned.
Thanks. And I'm now a bit maybe sounding critical, but I know it's a huge challenge, and but yeah.
Yeah, no problem.
They were very good questions.
You were making me think, guys, as you were discussing with us, that it's a problem we also have on our side. We are probably even one step before that. See, at the European Data Portal, when we measure the maturity of open data publishing by the member states, we cannot even afford doing mystery shopper-like experiments. For example, we cannot take a data scientist who tries to build exactly the same application in every country out of the data available from that country. That would be an amazing experiment to run. Imagine that a data scientist in every country needs to develop, say, the same weather app and check if the data is available, if the documentation is good enough, how long it will take to do it, how much interaction they need to have with the civil service to get what they need. That would be an amazing experiment, but can you imagine how expensive that would be?
I think it's okay. If you run a usability study, and this is what you do in a way, it's you select 30 people, one in every country, and you give them this task, and you give them some time. And okay, to do this every year, it's impossible, I guess. But it could be a nice experiment. You have good ideas.
I take your word, and I see Daniele and Ilka are listening, so let's take a note of this. Let's do it.
I'm agreeing with the good questions, and also definitely good for something for us to keep into consideration going forward. I'm also mindful of time and still want to open the floor if others have more questions. Otherwise, I'm just happy to jump in with another one. Okay, then my question.
Yeah, sorry. Go ahead, Eline. Go ahead.
My question was going to be based on the insights and the responses that you receive every year. How do you make actionable recommendations and next steps for the countries to continue improving?
Yes, so that's a good question. We actually have one part in our report that is called bench learning. And here we try to group countries to a number of characteristics that might be interesting. So for example, we look at the level of digital skills in a country, that is data available by the Digital Economy and Society Index. And we see so countries with similar digital skills score this well on our research. and what are they doing well, or what are comparable countries in that group doing. So we make different groupings and say, okay, you belong in this group based on these characteristics, and we see that you are a top performer in that group, or perhaps you're a little bit lagging behind. And it makes it interesting because then countries can truly learn from other countries that are quite similar to them. So to give an, well, let's say Malta and Germany are not that similar, whereas Estonia and Lithuania can learn quite a lot from each other because they are already quite similar. Also quite interesting to mention is that one of the things that we also use to group is the open data indicator of the Digital Economy and Society Index. So we also tend to try to group the countries based on their use of open data and see how that enables or improves their e-government.
Okay. Follow-up
And
question.
to add, I can add a little bit more into that because this is all very data driven. But like that's not the whole story. Like if we say to a country, you can improve by 10 points, they're like, okay, sure. How? So what we also include in most of our reports, and we have two reports. One is the insight report, which really focuses on, okay, the global levels, what do we see happening and what are the big trends? But also the background reports where there's also room for good practices. So we ask the member states, okay, what's something you have developed within your country in the last year or the last 2 years that has progressed your e-government state of play? And we include those in the background reports so that they also have practical or a little bit more tangible assets or ideas. Okay, I need to improve 10 points. Maybe I could take a lesson from Cyprus or from Poland or name a country.
Yes, yes, and to add a little bit on that, we group those good practices. So, for example, Portugal starts a new portal to start up your business. Then you can specifically look up starting a business, and then you see, okay, Portugal has recently done this with some success, and then governments can try to sort of copy or at least use the methodology that has been used before by, well, in this example, Portugal.
Follow-up question a bit on my side is you were saying that you group countries that have similar scoring or similar strengths to one another. What happens if how do you do this? Because, for example, looking back again at the European Data Portal in our ODM, we have 4 dimensions, and you guys have 3 dimensions. How do you group them when there is high discrepancy along these? If there is high discrepancy along these 3 dimensions, do you group them with some that are higher in terms of the digital single market or in user empowerment, or do you find that if one is good in one, they're usually not too far behind on the others?
Yeah, that would be
So,
very awesome.
yeah.
But I think our data set is a little bit too limited to do those specific types of analysis. For now, we mainly check against the e-government score as a whole compared to different indicators we collect from open data, for example, the open data maturity assessment. So we just give a more overall evaluation. Okay, considering the context variables we have, are you underperforming or performing as expected or overperforming? Unfortunately, not yet at the level of, like we can say, you're underperforming in your usability or mobile friendliness. That specific level.
Exactly. So we use the entire score, so the scores you see on this slide, and we also compare them with another data point from Eurostat, and that's called penetration. So what we measure is how good is e-government if you want to use it. The penetration indicator, which we also use, measures, say, how often is e-government used. So in a number of countries, we see that they actually have quite good e-government available, but that the use of e-government lags behind. And that perhaps could be a reason. So that's one of the things we see in our report, that digital skills are lagging behind. And then you can still have good e-government, but without the digital skills, it will not be used that often. So that are the sorts of insights that you can get out of that part of the analysis.
And it also works both ways around. Ask another question if you want, but otherwise Jochem and I can bounce around all the time.
I was going
but there's also.
going to give Ray the floor for her question because I also cut her off to ask mine.
I can give this quote in one sentence. The penetration and use of e-government also is related to how good e-government is. We have examples of services that have been put online, but were used so infrequently that they were put offline again. So it's also one hand feeds the other.
Yeah, maybe as a final question following you, Eline. Are you aware of any limits to your research?
Yes, so that sort of aligns with Roel's point, and I think also with the question of Els earlier. So first of all, does anything need to be online? So the example Roel mentioned is about starting a small claim procedure, which was taken offline, but you can also think of services which you measure, such as debt counseling. So people who are in debt might want to make an online appointment. But there's also something to say to keep that service not digital, because it's quite important to have the human connection. Another point is indeed, so let's say accessibility or different people trying to obtain a service. It's quite hard to get a full sample of everyone who wants to use the service and to also represent all those different people that you can meet in Europe, to represent all of those in our research. So I would say those are two important limits.
Yeah, if I can add on that, one other tricky thing also in our workshops and discussions we quite often have is not all services that you and I or other Europeans need to use are provided by public administrations, SEC that we evaluate or that are the main users of the results. So for example, if we have a studying life event, a lot of those services are provided by universities, which all have their own service providers, who all have their own methodologies, technologies. But they are very relevant to students in public life or in the services they need to use. So that's a difficult balance between what exactly can our readers and users influence, and don't we bunch up too much stuff from different companies or administrations. So it's difficult to keep a clear picture of what we are effectively evaluating and what can effectively be influenced by the results.
Okay, I think that's also a nice way to end this, unless there's more questions from the audience. We do have time for one more, or or another closing remark from Roel or Jochem on something they think they might have missed or that we neglected to ask or that they want to elaborate on before we close.
You're very welcome, Els. Yeah, thank you very much for your time. Our main goal with the eGovernment benchmark is eventually to encourage learning between different countries or government service providers. Please take a look at our reports or anything we've presented so far, and if you have suggestions for the next couple of evaluations that we could implement, please let us know. You at least have the contact of Eline, I guess, or other people from the Open Data Portal, European Data Portal, and that will reach us eventually. So please, if you have any suggestions, let us know.
That's also from my side, a big thanks for having us. A big thanks for all the good questions and discussion. And yeah, if you have any additional questions, you know how to find us.
Thank you very much for that. And also big thanks from us on behalf of the EDP and SCDS team for joining us and sharing these insights. And we look forward to continuing this conversation offline and also going forward in the future. Maybe invite you again next year to have a continuation on the next iteration or the eGovernment Benchmark 2021.
Yes, we would
I think we
certainly
would
have to.
certainly like that.
Excellent. Then have a great afternoon, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day. Bye.
Thank you very much.
Everyone.
Thank you.